Hello, I'm Melissa Samuels, Director of Alumni Programs at the University at Albany Alumni Association. Welcome to today's presentation. Before we get started, I wanted to go over just a couple of housekeeping items. You'll see on our bottom bar, we have two tabs available today. We'll be using the chat tab. Please feel free to let us know where you're tuning in from, or if you have comments to share during the event, that's where to go. We'll also be doing a Q&A at the end of the webinar. So if you have questions that you'd like to ask our presenter, please make sure to put them there. If you end up putting them in the chat, we may miss them. So let's get started. I'd like to share a little bit about our speaker today. David Youssefnia is an organizational psychologist with more than 20 years of experience in consulting work. Most recently, David co-founded a venture-backed startup to help engineering teams work more effectively and more efficiently. He's a frequent writer and speaker on the topic of work. David is a class of 1993 alum, and he was a psych major. He also wanted to share that he's a former delivery person for Mild Wally's and a cook at Washington Tavern, one of my favorites for sure. So David, thank you so much for joining us today. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you and gaining some insights into what we might expect at work post-COVID.
Great, thank you, Melissa. I really appreciate it. I'll just share my screen here. 1 second. There we go. And just here we go. Perfect. You guys all see my screen? Is that coming through, Melissa? Okay.
Yes, it is.
Great. Sorry about that. So I just wanted to thank you, Melissa, and the Alumni Association for inviting me to share this presentation with you all. I know the Alumni Association has been around for a really long time and has a strong history of supporting students in the university. And I thought that this was a really nice effort on the university's part and the association's part to return that favor and support alumni with some ongoing kind of education and webinars around the various topics. And I'm happy to share my point of view around the future of work post-pandemic. And so with that, why don't we get started? Here's the agenda of what I'd like to cover today. I want to go over some of the predictions that I shared back in May and give you an overview of what those predictions were, and then talk a little bit about how those predictions held up, and then end with some tips on how you can prepare for the future or the present, depending on how we want to look at this, and then finally leave some time for questions and answers. So why are we here? Back in March and April, we all had a little bit of time on our hands to reflect on what was happening. We're in the throes of a pandemic, and I took some time to reflect back on the last 20 years or so of my career in consulting, and the last few where I was spending time either advising or starting companies in the HR and people analytics space. And really kind of thought that there was some major differences between the pandemic and prior shifts. We've seen other shifts in our world happen gradually. We had the initiation of the assembly line or the specialization of work in offices, the large multinational companies looking at mainframes coming into work, desktops and cloud computing and SaaS models, as well as mobile. Those all happen, and they happen gradually. We'd have early adopters come in and follow a new approach or methodology or implement a new technology, and there was nothing that happened overnight. However, when the pandemic struck, we overnight, as not just a nation, a world, were kind of thrown into this new way of working. Our dining rooms were converted into offices. Our kids were, posted up in their rooms or on kitchen tables. We had trouble not only finding toilet paper and flour, but IKEA was literally out of desks because everyone was working from home. Computers were on back order, and all sorts of supply chain issues emerged. And basically what happened was we had this fast forward button that was pushed. It was pushed on what work was going to be like, and a lot of organizational psychologists and researchers were already writing and talking about how the future will be different and everything kind of just came up to hit us all at once. So that was kind of the impetus for putting together this content, and I'm happy to share that with you. Back in May, I published this post on predicting the future of work. It had 8 predictions that focused on the work environment, company culture, and talent management. And then we followed up each one of those on a weekly basis with additional musings and updates on those predictions. And so what I'm sharing with you is kind of a combination of those two writing efforts. All right, go here. So I will just kind of pause as for a quick poll. All right. So it looks like more than half of you are feeling less connected than you were pre-COVID to your team, with about a third about the same, and only 2 or 10% of you feeling more connected. And that's what we expect. When you're not in person with people, you lose a lot of those kind of drive-by serendipitous connections and collisions at work that make us feel more connected, not just to our team, but others that our team works closely with or sitting closely with. Great. Okay, so that way here. So the first prediction, this brings us to the first prediction, that remote work will lead us to feeling less connected at work. And we know remote work is here now. It's been here since basically mid-March. And we know that it's going to continue beyond COVID. Already, a few handful of well-known large technology companies have said that they will be working remote probably for the balance of, definitely for the balance of this year, it's almost over, and the next half of next year. Some have gone beyond that. Other organizations have just said we're never going back to the office. I think there was a large technology company in the Bay Area, I'm not sure which one, it may have been Airbnb, or maybe Pinterest, don't hold me to it, that paid $80 million to get out of their office. And so with that, while remote work keeps us safe from COVID, it does lead to feelings of isolation and decreases how connected we feel with each other. And that sense of connectedness, I think, and losing that is going to be way more pronounced for people who join companies during the pandemic. And if you play out some just basic kind of realities, um, a good turnover rate is somewhere between 7-8% annually. And if you're a crappy company, your turnover rate's going to be higher. And just with the nature of attrition, people will move. And so over time, that has a compounding effect on the number of new people that are joining organizations that have never met anyone in person. And so with that, you'll start to feel the impact of not feeling connected. And not feeling connected, I think, can also lead to a sense of burnout. And that burnout, will be more pronounced as you can't make a distinction between being at home or being at work. Just kind of turning your laptop on is supposed to elicit that feeling of being at work, and that's not happening. It's very blurred at the time. And not to mention, with schools still not open, or schools still kind of reverting back to remote learning, that kind of creates an additional strain on families and people working from home. And so how does that prediction pan out? Here we see, our friend Barak gives us a thumbs up. And I think we can say that prediction is, holding up pretty well. Burnout, just a quick Google search on the term burnout during COVID and working from home yielded 32 million results. Now, that's not a scientific finding, but then you start to look at what people are writing about. And these are 2 recent articles from Inc. magazine. Google announced a 3-word plan to help avoid burnout, and that's no meeting week. So they're going to have 1 week a month, or 1 week a certain period of time without any meetings to allow people to focus on work. Microsoft has another kind of approach to help with this. They're basically creating a virtual commute. So give yourself 15, 20 minutes to not be at home and not be at work, and just kind of think through your day like you would if you were driving or taking the bus or whatever it is to work. And that level of burnout is pervasive. 30% of frontline and information workers has increased their feelings of burnout at work. So that's the first prediction here. And we'll move on to prediction 2. A culture of trust is a must-have for employers. And so when you're working out of the office and you're out of sight of your managers and peers, trusting people to do what's right will become a key facet of the new normal. In addition to trusting employees, there's a sense of psychological safety that teams will need to experience and promote. And this is a construct that really helps us feel safe to bring our whole selves to work, as well as to be candid and share concerns and ideas. So in these safe environments, employees really feel like they can take risks and experiment even in the face of potential failure. This notion of psychological safety comes out of a professor's research at Harvard, Amy Edmondson, and really came to the forefront when Google did a study of the habits or the characteristics of high-performing teams. They looked at a bunch of teams across different parts of their large organization and found the one characteristic, or the top characteristic, that predicted team success had nothing to do with team composition or experience or size, but rather how safe the team felt. And when you think about it, when a team feels psychologically safe to call each other out on something that may not work well, or share feedback across levels or tenure levels or expertise levels, that can only lead to good things. And finally, lack of trust will more likely than not lead to counterproductive behaviors and ultimately higher turnover. So let's take a look at how this prediction pans out, and our friend Mark Zuckerberg gives us a thumbs up, and we see this in just a couple of examples here. McKinsey recently published a study back in July on the importance of safety during times of flux, and Harvard Business Review had a kind of an article here in August on how to foster psychological safety in virtual meetings. And we really think about how hard it is to read people in virtual meetings. Like, I have no idea right now if you guys are tracking with me because I can't see you, but that kind of gets compounded when people are just kind of either in a Zoom meeting, or some even have reported that in some organizations, in small team meetings, people turn off their cameras. And so again, I think we see psychological safety being an important component, as well as trust in the new normal. Now, prediction number 3, OKRs, which are known as objectives and key results, will become more pervasive. When you're all not in an office together, you can't really focus on activity. You have to focus on outcomes. And one way to focus on outcomes is to have a common framework for setting, sharing, and tracking goals and objectives within a team and across teams. And so since this activity, we're not able to observe activity, our managers will really need to rely on goal setting systems to get things done. And OKRs are one of those systems that we thought would be more pervasive in the new normal. OKRs came out of kind of Google was one of the early adopters of OKRs, and it's a very valuable system for organizations to have a common framework for setting goals. And here we kind of see a neutral prediction outcome here around OKRs. In just a quick search of the internet, there is a bunch out there, but it's mostly from OKR providers. So there's a little bit of, I take that with a grain of salt, that we don't know if people are actually using more OKRs more often during COVID or not. but I do still think it's important to have a system in place so that everyone has a common language to set, share, and track goals. And time for our second poll. All right, so looks like 57% of you feel that compared to the pre-pandemic, your manager touches base with you about the same, and then it's kind of evenly split between more often and less often. Uh, you know, that's an interesting finding. I would expect it to be at least that, and if not more often. There's probably a need to check in more frequently with your employees to make sure that they're um, you know, understanding what they need to do, clear on priorities, and also just doing okay. This notion of well-being and, as we mentioned earlier, burnout are important, and the manager plays a key role in both of those. Okay, so here we go. And so that brings us to the fourth prediction, which is manager effectiveness will be more critical. And in a remote first environment, the importance of having an effective manager is critical. Not being effective, or also known as being a crappy manager, will be exposed more quickly. There'll be more need for transparency and accountability in remote work environments. As we mentioned earlier, the focus less on activity and more on outcomes will surface poor performing teams and managers, I think, in a remote environment. The technical skills that most managers need to have to help understand what kind of work is done or how the work gets done will need to be balanced more so with the people side of being a manager. Having a sense of empathy, or being able to read people and checking in and holding effective one-on-ones and understanding who each person is and what motivates them is going to be critical. And as we mentioned earlier, burnout's on the rise. And if a manager is able to detect that and manage work appropriately and help teams prioritize, not only just help them prioritize the work, but also be that kind of that guard to help not overwhelm the team for requests from other teams, and help kind of manage the incoming workflow. Those are all really important skills for a manager to have. And I think that we think this prediction's panned out here, and we see multiple kind of stories around how to be an effective manager during times of crisis, and to lead during disruption, and focusing on mental health and well-being, which I think will become a really critical issue for organizations as we go into our 10th or 11th month of working from home. Our fifth prediction is around employee engagement and how engagement will become a business metric. I've spent the last good part of my career helping companies measure engagement, and there are always a big mix of organizations that think that engagement is just a nice to have measure or nice to have thing to promote. And that was probably more the case 10, 15 years ago. And that's really evolved, where employers are really focused on driving that engagement. And there's no better way of doing that than by listening to your employees. We started measuring engagement on a sometimes biannual or annual basis. And it was kind of a corporate ritual run by HR. And as technologies advanced and also the increased velocity of business, companies are now surveying their employees more frequently. Some, like Amazon up in Seattle, are doing so on a daily basis with these single questions. And I think that the trend will be that managers will and leaders will be held accountable for engagement, just as they're held accountable for other business outcomes, whether it's managing a P&L, sales, or delivering on their commitments. And here I think we see that prediction come through. And here's why. I think we see the importance of allowing employees to have their voice, and the engagement surveys are a really effective way to do that. And we see that organizations really need to tailor their workplace challenges and create goodwill and teamwork among employees, and doing so by listening to what their needs are and responding through an engagement survey process is one way to do that. And then we see this story from or article by Deloitte that looks at engagement as a way to learn around how to respond to COVID-19. Back in April and May, a few engagement providers shared some of their results and their findings from their client bases. And one of the things we heard over and over again, that the act of listening during this crazy time went a really long way. People just wanted to know that their employees were listening. They didn't need any massive changes to happening, but the act of just, hey, how are you doing, and checking in went a long way. And then we see, as we saw earlier with some of the other predictions, we're seeing people hearing, or organizations are hearing that employees are burnt out, and as a result, changing the way they do their work. Prediction 6 is around recruiting, and recruiting functions will need to be revamped. I've visited over the course of my career lots of different offices, and some of them are really cool, whether they had fixtures or amenities or just the location. All of that's gone, right? Like if I go apply for a job right now, how is my experience going to be different than what it is in my current situation? I'm going to be working in the same physical space. Maybe I'll get a new laptop. Maybe they'll give me a standing desk or a second monitor, but that's basically it. And so, as a recruiting function, recruiting functions need to focus on the role of culture. What is it like to work here? What is the path for my development as an employee? And then the work itself, how is that different than what I'm doing, and why is that important? Those will be key selling points, and we'll start to see recruiting functions focus on those elements. This one I gave a yellow light to. I think partly because it's still early. People are, I think, in a holding pattern. We're not on huge hiring sprees, so recruiting functions, I think, are able to tap into kind of a potential greater supply of good employees. What I did find when it came to recruiting, as it relates to COVID, from two kind of HR organizations, the focus was really more on process and approaches and compliance, questions you can ask and you can't ask. And so we haven't seen that flip yet, but I do think as the pandemic hopefully goes away over time with these new vaccines that are coming out, and organizations continue to work from home, that messaging will start to come up a little more. And it's time for our third poll. Right. And so it looks like the majority of folks here think that their team, once there's a vaccine, will not want to work from the office, or aren't fully sure. And with that, we'll bring to our Okay, with that, here we go. We'll bring to our next prediction, seventh prediction, which is that office spaces will need to be reconfigured as we come back to the office, which we haven't yet, and some have, but we will expect those who return. There'll be a greater, adherence to social distancing. Desks will be farther apart. Snacks and coffee areas may not even exist, and traffic patterns may need to be established where you walk through the office in a one-way fashion, so you're not going back and forth. Lower capacity with elevators, and staggered schedules to keep the office spaces less dense. This, I think, will happen. I've heard from some folks who work for larger organizations that have opened up their offices, have positioned working in an office as an alternative work from home space. What does that mean? That means if you're in the office and you and I work together and we have a conference call with a customer, we don't go into the meeting room to take that call. I take the call from my office and you take the call from your office. If there was an open kind of bullpen, area of desks, those will be gone, and people will need to stay in a enclosed office. When they come out, they're wearing a mask, so it's not going to be the same for a while. And I think that early indicators point that this is what's happening, although as of this week, most cities are back from kind of a mandated work from home uh, 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 um, mandate, and so we'll wait to see how this actually pans out. And then finally, our eighth prediction is around immersive video conferencing. Will help us get over this Zoom fatigue. Zoom and other conferencing tools do allow us to connect and collaborate, but it does come with a cost. There's this lack of fidelity. It looks like I'm floating on a bookshelf here a little bit. It's a little more formalized to interact with people. If you're watching kind of in gallery view, it does feel like there's a bunch of people watching you. And that all leads to what we've termed Zoom fatigue. And I think as a result, we'll see some improvements and advancements in immersive video conferencing to help us also reduce this fatigue, but also improve the fidelity of our interactions. And I think this is definitely happening. And Elon Musk thinks so too. So here's just a bunch of different newer companies that have really just accelerated their growth, and you can see this in terms of various ways to hold meetings, whether they're asynchronous meetings or meetings that are tapped into and pull in different data sources. There's some companies around that help plan events in an immersive VR type way, like spatial and alt space VR. But one of the more interesting ones is this company on the lower left called High Fidelity. And by the way, I have no affiliation with any of these companies, but High Fidelity, you should check out their demo. It allows you to basically walk through a virtual space, and it's all audio. And so you'll walk through and you'll hear different conversations as you navigate through the room, and it just replicates kind of being in this larger room, and then you can get pulled into conversations that way. Those are my 8 predictions. What I'd like to do is just share a little bit with you around how you can how you can prepare uh, for the future of work, whether that's kind of in the next few months or even tomorrow. As we know, connections are minimized and harder in remote work. So you want to make every effort you can to connect with people when appropriate. If you're a manager, be really mindful of this. Create some time and space for your existing team to just socialize. Hold a non-work related call or meeting, and don't just ask people to do it. Be a part of it, because they'll look to you for cues on what's important and what behaviors to follow. And if you have new people joining the team, know that they're coming in with a big disadvantage. And so, over communicate and over connect them with others. We mentioned managers and their effectiveness. That'll be critical to the continued success of your team during COVID. If you manage managers, really set them up for success and let them know that their role is really important during this time. And if you're a manager, make sure you're well resourced to be the best manager you can. What does that mean? That means kind of growing yourself and pushing yourself. If you tend to be a little more technical, uh, go the more personal route and try to learn more about each one of your team members as appropriate, and help them alleviate any potential risk of burnout, and make sure they're aware of any resources the organization has available to them around both physical and mental health and well-being. This notion of safety is going to be really important. Some things to look out for. Does everyone on your team speak up during meetings, right? And that's one thing to be really aware of. Are people willing to take risks and try new things? Is feedback shared easily amongst your team, or does it have to be pulled out um, with great effort? And then around this whole notion of Zoom fatigue, just give it a break. There might be these other platforms you can try out, or just try an asynchronous meeting from time to time. If you do a daily check-in with the team, try to do it on Slack every once in a while. Or the next time you're on a phone call or you have a meeting with someone, instead of you sitting on your desk or at your desk in front of a computer, call the person or have them go on a walking meeting, and you could both walk separately and talk on the phone together. Just mix it up so that people don't get fatigued and burnt out on using the same technology over and over again. And then if you're involved with recruiting, make sure that the non-physical aspects of what it's like to work there are clearly communicated and sold to prospective employees. Can you describe the culture? How does the company invest in development? Or what does a day in a life look like in this role? Like, walk people through the different things that they're going to be doing, and what differentiates working for your organization than others. So that's kind of a summary of what I have to share for you today. We kind of now go to kind of the Q&A, and happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you so much. We do
Yeah.
already have a few questions in the Q&A, and I also had some sent to me early on. So we'll jump in. First question: from a managerial standpoint, and with the need for additional engagement, what advice might you have to avoid being too hands-on, or what we might call helicoptering?
Yeah. So, I mean, that's a great question. I think you can helicopter if you're asking people for updates on every little thing that they're doing, right? But be more of the coach, right? How can I help you? How are things coming along? Helping them be unblocked and creating an ongoing communication. And so, it's like, if you ask the same set of questions over and over again, you start to see patterns. And if the pattern changes, that creates an opportunity for you to kind of dig in deeper. So you also want to read each person uh, well, and depending on what you do and the nature of your team, you know, for example, in technology, you might have a junior engineer and a more seasoned engineer. You might give the seasoned engineer a little more leeway because they've been around a little longer, and then with the junior engineer, kind of give them a little more support.
Great. Another question. Do you think we'll see more organizations focusing on being more resilient versus being more efficient?
Yeah, I think you'll see the notion of resiliency and grit come up, and being able to learn from challenges and bounce back, being a differentiator than efficiency, especially in emerging companies and companies that are dealing with changing markets, right? So if you're in hospitality, efficiency isn't going to get you to the finish line. Figuring out how to change and adapt in this environment and bring your team along with you is going to be more important. So I think it will depend on the industry that you're in and how the market and what your market is like now given the pandemic. But I think resiliency for sure is up there.
Okay, another question. How would you recommend making it more comfortable to discuss a view that might be different than a colleague's via Zoom with our team?
Yeah, so I guess it's a couple things. If it's a large Zoom meeting and it's a controversial point of view, you may want to have a smaller one-on-one meeting to discuss it. And then there's always the ability to kind of share um, the counterpoints to what you're doing collectively. So like basically seeing it from their perspective and then sharing other perspectives, and then in enlisting the support of other people that might help you communicate that story. So kind of putting it in those terms, I think helps. But also the other thing we found to be helpful too is just what is the impact on the end user and the customer, and putting people in that perspective can be helpful too.
Yeah, makes sense. Okay, next question.
Right.
Do you think we'll continue to see organizations expand their use of contingent workers after COVID?
Um, Good question. I think there tends to be been through a few down cycles in my career, and what we see is once we kind of hit the bottom and start to kind of come back up from an economic perspective, employers, especially larger ones, will go contingent first once before they get a sense of what the economy is going to actually look like. So I think that contract workers and temp workers will continue to be used during this time, because there might be short-term needs an organization has, but they don't have the long-term view yet on what their hiring needs might be.
All right. We have a question from Matt. When hands-on training is necessary, will YouTube videos be the norm, or will there be other mechanisms to help?
Yeah, great question. I think, I mean, personally, just being home a lot, I've relied on YouTube to learn how to do a lot of things around the house. But those are really like
Yeah.
one-off things like installing a new water filter or whatever it might be. I think that video-based training will be one way. Will continue, but I think with this trend in immersive video conferencing and VR and AR, I think for more physically based jobs, we might start to see that be that continue as well. And that, that could also be as part of a kind of role play. So you imagine doing a customer service role play with a virtual customer that's augmented or automated, and that might have a little more fidelity. Or I don't know if anyone's tried to take care of a customer service issue, but I've sometimes found the chat functions on their websites would be just as efficient, if not more efficient. So why can't that be a new way to practice your training as a customer service rep? So lots of different options there.
Yeah. Okay. A question from Christine. Companies can no longer ignore the needs of employees' home lives and the people they are responsible for caring for.
Mhm.
Do you think this understanding will continue when the pandemic is over or back to business as usual?
Yeah, I mean, if you're working from home, I mean, what I think part of the issue is right now, we don't really know what people's home life is like. And you have to assume that if they have school age kids, they're juggling right now, and the kids might be, needing help logging into a Zoom, or get me a peanut butter and jelly sandwich. Like, you may not feel comfortable having childcare at home because of the pandemic or economic realities. So when things go back to normal, assuming kids are out of school, I think organizations will still support working from home, but and just make sure that people are supported physically to do that. But I think that what we may see is the boundaries of home and work life will be a little more um, solid, in that you don't know what someone might be doing between 11:30 and 12:30. They might be making lunch for their kid, right? And so that person might make up that hour later in the evening, and that leads to kind of this snowball of burnout. Because if you're a manager and then you're sending an email at 6:30 p.m., your employee might feel obligated to respond then, and then they respond, and that goes to two other people, and then that kind of continues on. So I think we'll start to see more discrete boundaries post-pandemic around work hours, from especially if you continue working from home. And then, if you look to other parts of the world, some countries, make you keep your phone. Let me see your phone. Yeah, your phone at home, your work phone at home, uh, because if you check your email in the evening, that's outside of whatever negotiated labor agreements might be in place. So there's a lot of different things that might happen once we get back to the new normal.
Okay, a couple more questions. My position was eliminated due to COVID budget constraints and I've experienced a lot of predictions mentioned here today. Any advice on how to prepare for the next opportunity, knowing these trends exist?
Yeah, I think that there's this we don't know when things will be back to normal. So, you know, put yourself in this position of, if you're the consumer, like the person who's going to go get the job, look at some of these predictions to evaluate future opportunities. Like, am I working for a manager that's strong? Does the business or the teams have a sense of psychological safety? So you can use some of these as a filter as you look at jobs and opportunities. And then, I think that, just from, like a job seeking advice, just you never know when or where that might come from, and use every opportunity to connect. So like the networking events aren't happening as much, and use kind of this time as an opportunity to just reach out to people that you may not have talked to before and build your network. I mean, they have more and they have less time, and people are sometimes more open to talking and helping each other. And I think just make use of that opportunity.
Yeah, I certainly think using your alumni network,
Yep.
the nice segue right into that is a great opportunity. So folks that
Yep.
are looking to do that, certainly feel free to reach out to me. I think we have time for a couple more.
Sure.
Laura wants to know, is it more likely that interviews may be more successful if they are on Zoom?
I think that's a question that's being addressed. I think people are looking at that right now. I think the technology will continue to evolve. It depends on the person and your comfort level. If you've been working this entire time and on Zoom all the time, you have a different level of familiarity or comfort with it, versus if you're someone that may have taken a little time off or new to technology, then it might be a little harder. I think that video interviewing will become more and more critical, and so you want to set yourself up to be able to not have distractions and look at the camera and have the proper lighting and not feel like you're on a a federal witness program and dark web. So I know that a lot of job boards and job sites are investing in video interviewing, and I think that it's going to be an interesting space for the future as well, because when you think about all of this can be potentially recorded and transcribed, and so that you could be graded on your interview without having to talk to someone. So there's a lot of things that might be coming down the line in this space too.
Okay. With more workers working remotely, will we see new methods for employers to monitor employee productivity? You referenced that a little bit earlier, but
Yeah,
what do you
yeah.
think?
Yeah, I think it's there. I think it's there, and it's happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And there'll probably be, a backlash on it. I think in Europe, it's probably a lot harder to do with the privacy laws that are in place. But I think that companies will want to know whether you're logged in and you're working, and how do you measure that? Is it keystrokes? Is it number of apps you're in? Like if I'm on a Zoom and and I look at something else, is that good or is that bad? I don't know. And I think we'll probably see a backlash on this. saw a little meme of someone showing what their work from home setup was like, and it was a computer, keyboard, and a mouse, and the mouse was connected to a little stick. It was like taped to it, and the other end of the stick was taped to a fan, an oscillating fan that was going back and forth, right? And so as employers monitor more, eventually people will figure that out and will push back or try to game the system. And this is why trust is so important. And so if you can engender a sense of trust in the workplace, you don't need to monitor. But that gets harder at scale. So a smaller, 20, 30, 40, 100 person organization, it's easier to engender that. At scale, at tens of thousands of people, it becomes a lot harder to do.
Yeah, makes sense. Makes sense. All right, well, let's wrap up. I'll ask my question is,
Yeah.
you put these 8 predictions together a while ago. It's been a number of months. Any new predictions that that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I think that this session today and some of your questions have gotten me thinking too. I think that the video interviewing will continue to be a big part of this. Monitoring implications will be a big part of this too. And I think that, we'll be looking for new ways to, train people. But the other big thing is like, there's going to be a massive shift in the types of jobs that are available. And you're going to have huge segments of the workforce uh, that won't have the jobs that existed prior to the pandemic. And how do we prepare and train those folks to be able to survive and thrive in the new economy? And I think that'll be a big area that we'll see organizations hopefully invest in for the good of the of society. So that's kind of one of my other big predictions. Before we wrap, Melissa, too, just in case anyone wants to connect with me on LinkedIn, you can look me up here. And if you have any other questions, happy to answer them by email. I saw that someone did give a shout out to Mount Wally, so I'm glad that there's people from
Yeah.
my vintage of Albany on the call. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I mean, this was kind of fascinating, and I'm sure I and everyone else will be sort of following along with these predictions as hopefully COVID wraps up over the next, I don't know, 5, 6, 7 months.
Yeah,
We'll see how it goes, but definitely interesting times ahead for all of us that are in the workforce. So thanks so much for
great.
sharing some of your ideas with us. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. Have a great day,
All right.
everyone.
Bye, everybody.